Hello and welcome to this week's Property Matters on Dublin South FM, the show that brings global trends to an Irish audience. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or by email at hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Your host today are Carol Tallon and myself, Bryan Fox. We have an exciting lineup ahead of us today for the show. First up in studio is Pat Davitt. He's CEO of IPAV. Pat, good to have you in the studio.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks very much for the invitation.
You're welcome. Let me ask you first, how are your members finding the marketplace, I suppose, Dublin and nationally at the moment?
We have a property barometer, which you may know about. We take out every 6 months. It's actually just due to come out at the moment for the results for the last 2 quarters of 2019. And in those 2 quarters, a lot of the property markets have been flat. We look at 41 different property markets throughout the whole country, and we look at the actual sales that have happened, not just what the asking prices are, etc. We look for members. That gives us an average price of sales of 2-bedroom apartments, 3-bedroom semis and 4-bedroom semis for the past 6 months. And we found, generally looking at it, we found that some of the markets are back slightly, not near as much as where they were the previous 6 months. Some of them are actually increasing again, which is probably a good sign, because there has been a correction in the marketplace, which you're probably well aware of. And in December, things seem to have picked up a little bit again. So I think a lot of the certainty that Brexit has brought, I think, has kicked into the market in December, and right into the new year now, the markets have moved on slightly again. I think for a lot of the second-hand, the new houses have changed slightly a bit as well, and the prices have moved on as well, which is very, very good.
And tell me, how's our reputation internationally? I believe that the word has got out that Ireland has a spotted problem in terms of getting property and renting property as well. Is that a factor, do you think, in businesses coming here?
You mean in property ownership, that the properties aren't there for people to buy?
Rental, exactly, yeah.
Well, I think that's no big secret. Yeah. I think if you look at any of the markets, or any of the commentators have been talking about this for quite a while, it is a big thing. It's very difficult to put your finger on it as to how many properties and houses are needed in the residential market. We heard the central bank telling us recently that we needed 30-odd thousand, 4,000, I think, or something like that, a year for the next 10 years, which is 340,000. We're building about 20,000 at the moment. The RSI recently told us that the price would have to come down if we're going to build these amount of houses. But yet, a lot of people down at the bottom end of the market can't actually buy properties, because and the funny thing with political parties at the moment, and I was listening to the leaders' debate last night, and they were telling us they couldn't afford to buy properties. That's not the case. They can afford to buy properties. There's absolutely no problem, because they're able to prove that they can buy properties by the rents that they're paying, but they're not able to borrow enough money, and that's the huge problem, and that's where the sticking point is. But I think from foreign lands, like people
because the central bank regulation, obviously.
Yeah, talking about the central bank macro-prudential. But I think from foreign countries, I think looking at it, yes, of course, but I think for workers that want to come here, there are jobs, and people will always get somewhere to stay when they're working. I think there is a shortage of housing, there's no doubt about that. But the funny thing is that from 2012 or 13, we had 300,000 houses too many. In 4 or 5 years later, we had 300,000 houses too little. So, it's a very funny market in a small amount of people as to where we're going, and how many houses we need to keep the market topping over.
Mm-hmm. And can I just ask you too, now that we're in election time at the moment, what would your members' reaction be to current government policy? I mean, there's a lot of the current minister is getting a lot of stick in relation to it.
Well, the strange thing is, when you read, as I'm sure you have read, both of the manifestos of the two main parties, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, you would read them and you would say, God, they have really put their finger on what's needed. But if that's the case, why haven't they done it? The housing market, I don't think it's any more difficult than any other market. We need houses, we need places for people to live. So, are we going to build them? Are we going to let people buy them? What are we going to do? And they haven't done that, but reading all their manifestos, they seem to know exactly what they want to do. So it's very strange, when you look at it like this, because some of the things that we've been saying for a long number of years are in those manifestos. But even to meet with the minister to discuss those sort of things in the past has been very, very difficult. You couldn't do it. And even when you do meet with them, it's still difficult for them to actually take you serious that is what's needed. But still, when you see the manifestos, it's a different thing altogether.
I think that's a really interesting take on it, because I think you really nailed it there. It's frustrating to see the parties show an understanding of what needs to happen, and then you wonder why hasn't it happened over the past 5-6 years. So I understand the frustration there. But in terms of meeting with the ministers, do your members, are their voices being heard? Because the idea of IPAV, obviously, in large part, is as not just a lobby, but actually as an organisation that is representing estate agents. So estate agents, this is the mechanism that they use to speak to their minister?
Well, this is the mechanism that probably IPA members will use to try and meet ministers and to try and discuss with government and make them aware of the situations that are happening on the ground. We've been proposing for 7 years now at least that there should be a council, a working council of advisors behind the government, that the government can meet with people that's in the business that can actually tell them what's wrong. Just because you're an auctioneer, it doesn't mean to say that I have a conflict of interest if I tell somebody that they need more houses. Mm-hmm. Why shouldn't I tell them? Because I know.
Would that work on the same basis that, it's one of the things we've discussed a lot on the show here in the past, that for some reason health and housing seem to really fall mercy to whichever political party is in power at the time, whereas we look at other or similar national interests, like for example tourism or food, and they are able to adopt a long-term strategy, and successive governments work towards that long-term strategy. Yet in health and housing we don't seem to be able to do that. With each new changing of the guard, good policies perhaps that haven't been given an opportunity to work are thrown out, and we seem to go back to square one a lot. So I suppose really what I'm wondering here is if there was an advisory board as you're proposing there, would that help stabilise housing policy so that it wouldn't be so subject to political whims?
Well, I think it certainly would make ministers aware of the problems if they're not aware of them as it is. Like I remember sitting down with the Minister for Housing not many years ago, and this was supposed to be a brainstorming. And we were sitting down, about 14 or 15 of us, and the minister sat down, and his first sort of shot off the hip was, I hope, he said, that you all feel the same as me, that we need to have more of these, I call them vulture funds, he called them professional landlords, into buying properties in the marketplace. Now, we were all brainstorming, but he was actually had his own mind made up, and he had the department with him. So he had his own agenda before ever. And I said to him, sure, what's the point in you telling us this if you want to get our opinion? And he said, this is really what's needed. And it may be what's needed from his eyes, but it's not what's needed from the people that are in the business. And I told him that at the time, and things haven't changed. But it's ideal for us to do that. I wrote to the minister recently on finance about the 7.5% stamp duty. And I got a reply back, and I was actually shocked at the reply, because he seemed to say that, or whoever wrote the letter seemed to say that the market is flying along, basically, that it's going very well. I was making the point that it's not going well in the country. Like, once you leave Maynooth, the country starts.
Mm-hmm. But so it sounds as if he's been dictated by civil servants.
Well, he said that his advisors had been telling him, and now his advisors couldn't tell him this because, basically what they were saying was that the prices were practically similar across the country as they were in Dublin. Things were going every bit as well, and they had put on 6% stamp duty, which was an increase of 4% previous.
And now it's important to point out that we're talking about commercial property. And we know that in terms of commercial property, we know that activity outside the capital isn't even a fraction.
But it isn't even a fraction. But he seemed to sort of think that because he put on 4%, and maybe a couple of people like me wrote about him and talked about it, that it went on and no hassle, and now he was going to stick another 1.5% on. But I can tell him that in good Midland towns, like you talk about Tullamore, Mullingar, Athlone, Portlaoise, Roscommon, Navan, those type of towns, if you sold a property there in 2006 or 2007 at the height of the property market and you got 3 million for it, a lot of those properties today wouldn't be worth 1 million. Now, that is factual. Okay. And those people are thinking that the property market is flying outside of Dublin the same it is in the city. Now, it's different in the city, and that's fair enough. But we asked him, could he bring this in, in stages? Could he bring it in? We'd say maybe no change up to 500,000, and from there on, and it wasn't a runner. It's not a runner to do it. But it's worrying to think that people are advising him on this basis when most people outside of Maynooth know that it's not right.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that this situation comes about because there's a lack of industry bodies feeding into policy?
I think it's terrible to say that there's no. Well, certainly we're not one. Maybe the minister has people advising them, but IPAV aren't one of them. And there's no doubt about that. And we've been calling for this for years and years. Like we've been calling for small builders that they should be able to build and they should be able to get finance. And lo and behold, I see in the Fianna Fáil manifesto where they're looking at exactly the same thing now, where they set up this fund of 750 million. They charge 8% for interest, which is a lot less than what you would get maybe from some of the vulture funds out in the marketplace, because you'd be looking at 15 or 16%.
Absolutely.
But they're saying that some of those small builders, which are building 3 and 4 houses maybe a year, maybe 10 or 12 houses a year, they're the builders that built us out of a lot of difficulties as we are at the moment. Like that money could be borrowed in Europe and could be given to those builders at 2 and 3%, but they're given it through the pension fund, and that pension fund wants to make money. So they're actually making money on giving the money to the builders and charging them interest, and they're expecting them to build houses then and build them at a price that people can buy. And this is in the manifesto that they're going to look to do this, and it's a great idea. It should be done. There's no doubt about it. But the interest rate is the thing. If you're able to give builders money at 2% and you're able to ask them to build so many properties, and even if you talk at the end of the day of a price control at the end of the day, I think builders will listen to it, because many of these builders have little sites and small sites and they will build them.
But isn't the issue still the cost of land as well, in Dublin particularly?
Well, I think the cost of land, Bryan, is a concern. But I recently looked at a site that was for sale down in Wexford, and it was bought in the boom. There was no planning permission on it. It was bought for over 4 million, and now it has planning permission on it for about 35 houses, and it was sold very recently for 800,000. And one of the biggest builders in Ireland owns that site. So, the land prices, certainly there's a problem there, and the land prices, there is a problem with the land. And in Dublin, there's probably a price problem with the land. But in most areas of the country, sites that were 100,000 are probably now 10,000 and maybe 15,000. And that's realism. That's where we are, and that's where the prices are. So that land isn't as huge much of a problem as it was. But what is a problem is that builders have land. If they have history with the land, like they bought the land at huge prices, then there's a problem, because they're trying to get those prices back. And that's up to them, really from that point of view. But to buy land today and to start off at a green site and to buy it isn't that expensive or near as expensive as what it was.
Okay, look, given your membership and the breadth of membership that you have right across the country, I'm almost assuming that you have a good sense of taking the pulse of what the industry is thinking about. And we've talked about development land, but for say the rental market, last year we saw the extension of rent pressure zones outside of the main urban centres. Have you got a sense, or have you gotten any feedback from your members as to, was that the right move? Is that something they were in favour of?
There's a whole problem from the first day that the rent pressure zones were set up. And I was actually at that first launch. And I spoke at that particular launch, and I talked about the rent pressure zones that were set up in a couple of areas in the city in Dublin. And they set up a few areas. And in those rent pressure zones, they left new houses out of the rent pressure zones, so that people could charge basically whatever rent they wanted to. And they've been out of those rent pressure zones until 2019. July 2019, the minister eventually changed the law and put them into it. So you have houses that are inside in the rent pressure zones. You have houses that are outside of the rent pressure zones. You have the people outside can charge where they want. They're bringing the rent up to X, Y, or Z. Let it be high, whatever it is, more than likely going to be higher than what the previous ones are, and they can change the rent at will. You have these people in the rent pressure zones who can't change, only by 4%, and then you have people in the rent pressure zones who are caught because they were renting their houses and they were being very decent to tenants and not changing the rent every year and bringing it up to scratch and everything like that, where you could have people who are actually charging €1,000 for rent when the rent was actually 2,000. And now they're stuck in the rent pressure zones and they can only put up their price by 4%. So we're saying to the government that you should have put a rent pressure zone right across the country. Put every house into it. Every house. And put them in at market rent. And every property would be in it. And even in the new Sinn Féin bill, I see, for where they want to freeze the rent, they want to leave the HAP properties out of it. You can't do that. Germany did that in Berlin, but they have thousands of properties. We don't have thousands of properties in Ireland that we can do that with.
And in terms of the proposed rent freeze from Sinn Féin, have your members expressed opinions on that?
Well, at the moment what happens is that there is a rent freeze at the moment for 2 years out of the rent pressure zones. So if you're not in the rent pressure zones, you can rent your house today and your rent is frozen for 2 years. And what happens when you come out after 2 years? you want to rent it up to where the rent should have been and should have gone to. So you come out of that rent pressure zone and the rent goes up by 30, 40, 50%. And hence, we don't see the 4% in the way we should see the 4% in the figures, because these other rent increases that are coming out of the 2-year rents are actually bringing them all up. So that 4% now, in average, could be gone to 6 or 7%. And of course, everybody's saying the rent pressure zones are not working. Of course, they're working because you can't bring the rent above 4%, but it's the other ones that are coming out of it. Now, I hear Sinn Féin now speaking about that it should be at CPI, and it should be at CPI levels. And if it is at CPI levels, well, then fair enough. I think 3 years is a long time to tell people that the rents are frozen. But if it's a thing that it's going to work, and we're going to have it to work right across the country, every property needs to be in it.
And do you believe? Because this is important, particularly in the context of the election. Do you believe that there's a problem, constitutional problem over the rent freeze?
Well, I'm obviously not a lawyer, so I don't know. But obviously, the government talks about it, and I'm sure that they have looked at the lawyers. And if they say there is, like we can believe that there is, I'd say. Now the question is, can they get over it?
Well, I mean, they're saying now is to test and bring to the Supreme Court. Do you think that would be a valuable exercise?
I don't know that it would or wouldn't, being quite honest about it. I don't honestly know that. I think that at the end of the day, I think the government parties, or the parties in the Dáil at the moment, it's a pity that we can't all agree, apart from meeting people outside, that they can't all meet inside and sort out what the policies should be to get us out of this situation we're in. Now, the big question is, Brian, is there this big shortage of houses, or is there not this big shortage of houses? That's the problem, because there are so many vacant houses and so many other scenarios with houses. We talked about the mortgage prudential rules. We said to the central bank when they reviewed their rules in November, we said to them that you should raise the allowance for people who are earning up to €50,000, that they could borrow 4.5 times their income. Not that we want these people to borrow more money, but you've somebody who's earning €40,000. I know I heard the Taoiseach last night saying that the average wage is 47,000. It may well be, but it's not down the country. But if you take somebody who's earning 40 or even 47,000, if you take someone who's earning 50,000 just for the sake of working it out, they can borrow 3.5 times that, which is 170,000. They won't buy any property for it.
Tell me, just with the time we've left, talk to us a little bit about the digitisation of buying and selling in Ireland, prop tech end of it.
Oh.
Well, obviously
we talked about this off air before we came in.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. And obviously, IPAV expressed quite a strong opinion in the media last week.
IPAV do a survey on this, conveyancing survey among members, and we do it mostly every 2 years. This year we did it. We had over 300 members that actually have completed it. And it's a simple run of questions, as to how long it takes to close a sale, from the time that you get the instruction to the time that the contract is signed, and then from the time the contract is signed till the actual deed is closed and completed. And the average is 10 weeks. So that the average could go from 10 weeks to maybe 20 weeks. So we're asking that there should be an conveyancing system on PropTech, that it should be there. A click of a button should be able to do this. But apparently there are many, many problems from the time that somebody gets an instruction. Like if I go to look at somebody's house, obviously there are things that's required, certificates, maps. Planning is seemingly one of the biggest things. And across Ireland there are so many different planning authorities that apparently they all have different software systems. There is no system apparently that solicitors can actually search that is one system that they can actually get planning documents. Some of the documents are on these systems, some of them aren't on these systems. So this is the first thing, and a hub needs to be set up by the Property Registration Authority that is have all the plannings on it throughout the country. And if that was set up for starters, it would be a huge thing. Now, granted, there are other problems with certification. There's other problems with solicitors and contacting each other. There's other problems with people who don't answer the solicitors and all this type of thing. But I think if the central part of it...
That's the human element.
That's the human element. But I think if the central part of it was set up and set up properly, I think that we would move on very quickly. And I think there's no reason why, actually in the Fianna Fáil manifesto, there's something about probate, and they're talking about probate when people die, that the relations take so long to put their properties to get them sorted out. But the living ones are here as well, and the living ones needs to be sorted out. If you sell your property, you want to move on. You want to sell it, you want to get your money, you want to buy another house, and you want to move on. That's what you want to do. So they need to extend that to cover e-conveyancing as well.
Yeah. Look, I think that's a huge topic. It's one that's come up so many times on the show over the past 12 months, so it's definitely something we'll be revisiting. And I know the frustration you're expressing is something that we've heard here quite frequently, so it's definitely a topic that we're going to come back to again. So Pat Davitt, from CEO of IPAV, thank you so much for joining us today. Stay tuned after the break. We'll be joined by Carl Friel, National Sales Manager at TopCon Positioning Ireland. Stay tuned.
You are listening to Dublin South FM on 93.9 この番組は地域密着型を目指しています
Do you need a professional-looking website or graphics for your company? Does your current website work on all modern devices, such as tablets and smartphones? If not, you are losing business. Preamp Digital Media provides a full range of solutions to give your company the edge in today's digital world. Please visit www.preampdigitalmedia.com for all the information you need. That's www.preampdigitalmedia.com. Do you play bridge? Well, why not join us for a game at the Don Marmion House in Dundrum every Thursday from 7:30 to 10:30. We're just opposite the Dundrum Town Centre on the Sandyford Road. No partner is required and a joker available. And it's only €5 per person, including light refreshments. That's bridge at the Don Marmion House in Dundrum every Thursday, 7:30 to 10:30.
Are you part of a local community group or representative organisation active in the Dún Laoghaire-Rathdown area? Why not join a network of over 400 such groups in the Dún Laoghaire-Rathdown Public Participation Network? You can join the group, influence local policy, get regular updates about funding and other opportunities, connect with other groups like yours, publicise your group and even get free training and support. Make sure your voice is heard through DLR Public Participation Network as a registered group in the county. Dún Laoghaire-Rathdown Public Participation Network. For full information, find us online at dlrppn.ie. That's dlrppn.ie.
Broadcasting to South Dublin on 93.9. This is Dublin South FM.
And you're very welcome back to Property Matters here in Dublin South FM with Carol Tallon and myself, Bryan Fox. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or email at iPropertyRadio.com. So as mentioned there before the break, we now have in the studio Carol Friel, right? Karol Friel,
Correct,
okay. National Sales Manager at TopCon Positioning Ireland. So Carol, what does TopCon actually do?
I suppose we provide technology for the construction industry, not just construction industry. We're also involved in other industries, the medical industry, for example, for eye testing, medical care equipment for hospitals, for example. And agricultural industry, we're involved in technology when it comes to the machines, not just the tractors, but implements and automising that industry, really, if you know what I mean. So we're adding technology to the machines to make them a lot more efficient in what they do.
Right across the board?
Right across the board, yeah. So software and hardware, sensors, weighing systems, positioning systems, I suppose, and that's also on the construction side. It's positioning systems onto machines and also software, cloud technology and connecting machines up together. For example, in the construction industry, we supply software and hardware, as I say, and just makes that a business and a lot more efficient.
Does that make business difficult for you because you're not specialising in any particular area?
It does, but we have different divisions and different specialists within each of those divisions that look after that, if you know what I mean. TopCon is a company, or a Japanese company. So originally, 1932, they were set up. Originally, actually, part of Seiko Watches.
Really?
Originally set up TopCon originally, yeah. Back in 1932. Now we have, we're directly in 26 countries throughout the world, and also then distributors throughout most other countries in the world, yeah.
So you've really had a front row seat to the increasingly digital construction technology environment that we're in. So actually, because you're in Ireland and other countries, you might be in a position maybe to benchmark. How are you seeing because construction is such a traditional industry and we're seeing huge areas towards digitisation, but how are you seeing Ireland, say, benchmarking against other European countries?
The adoption rate of the technology, so obviously with the upturn now in the construction industry over the last couple of years, we see a huge increase in the demand for the technology. Now, there's a couple of driving forces and factors behind that. Obviously, the upturn in construction, as I mentioned, but also too in more efficiencies on site. Probably one of the other driving factors is to do with the education and students, maybe civil engineering, haven't chosen those courses over the last 10 years, and so those students are not coming out of college. So one of the ways the industries and the construction companies can make their business more efficient is to add technology, so that reduces potentially the requirement for engineers, for example.
And the
makes that
skills gap, but the skills gap in construction certainly isn't an Irish problem. This seems to be a global problem. And I understand that, if we look back a decade, this wasn't a profession maybe that school leavers were choosing as a primary form of their universities, or even intern or apprenticeships.
Yep.
But is that can we attribute too much to that? I mean, is this an industry that needs to become automated to make it viable, to make it scalable? Is that maybe one of the driving forces?
For sure, yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned there the skills gap, but something that to bring people into the industry itself is something that we're actually looking at the moment. We for example, deal with third level education, but something we're looking at recently actually is something in second level to bring more people into the industry. Obviously, we know construction hasn't got the best of images when it comes to it when they're competing, for IT, students competing against IT. You know what I mean? It has that.
And is there a vacuum there, do you think, with the students in relation to a career in engineering?
It's a perception, I suppose, that's there, isn't there, within construction? So it's something that needs to be obviously addressed, not by ourselves, obviously, but by the whole industry. And that's something that we're looking at, and we have a keen global interest in actually addressing that too, and helping that in some way to change the perceptions, I suppose.
Absolutely. I'm delighted to hear that you're going into secondary schools, and I hope the next time we have a conversation you will tell me that you've gone into primary schools and not just boys' schools, but mixed schools and girls' schools. And one of the reasons for this that I recently at an event was seated next to a career guidance teacher from a secondary school, and she went on to talk about how trying to encourage particularly females into the industry was one thing, but the level of understanding as to how digitised the whole process is getting, or in terms of construction moving towards off-site or MMC, methods of modern construction, there isn't a good understanding with the people who are advising the students who are going to be moving in and choosing college courses. That's a real problem. So, I mean, it's one thing to get to the students, but maybe should we be educating our career guidance teachers that actually 100%. Construction doesn't happen on site anymore?
We've just done something recently with Tallon College, who are the first in Ireland to adopt what's called Class of Your Own. So it's Alison Watson, who's now an MBE, who awarded for that for her efforts in second level, where she's actually introduced what's called a design, engineer and construct module into, for us, it's transition year. And the whole idea of that is, as you say, at that age in transition year, they're thinking about their CEO. Yeah. So for us, it's too late whenever they're at third level, because they've already decided possibly their career path, and that's what their education is focused on, if it's IT, for example. So what we've decided to do, and it's been very, very successful for Alison. Now she's rolling this out in not just the UK, Dubai, Asia, US, now in Ireland, as I say, with Tallon. And now we're, as you say, with the career guidance, we're actually informing the career guidance teachers within Tallon, for example, and also the students themselves of what the possibilities are within construction for both males and females, and to change that perception of construction and what it is, and showing them the digital side of it.
But also
and
showing
possibilities
for people who are interested in a career in IT that actually a career in IT and a career in construction aren't different things.
Absolutely,
similarly,
100%.
So the Tallon College obviously prompted Alison prompted them to become involved.
Yeah, basically, 100%. And they could see that there is, they can see that there is a demand there, if that makes sense. And it's how do we focus these students in thinking about this as a career path. So obviously then they're getting backed by the third level. The likes of TU Dublin, for example, are really encouraging the likes of Tallon and helping them to, show their students this career, that the opportunities that are here, if that makes sense, and changing that perception, as I say, of construction. It's not just, being on site in the, 12 months a year, no matter what the weather is.
Yeah.
That, for example, an engineer of the future will be sitting basically in an IT office, where he's controlling machines from the comforts of an office, you know what I mean, instead of walking around the site. And that has health and safety aspects, not just the actual IT aspects, and not just the personal engineer himself, him or her. And it's basically changing that perception of what the future of the industry is.
Okay, and I think that's massively important. So that was one of the reasons that we really wanted you to join us in studio to talk about it. We understand that encouraging the next generation is massively important. But as sales manager, I would imagine that you meet people of generations who would be slightly more advanced and maybe not so receptive to new things.
Yeah, for sure.
So tell me, just in terms of going out, adoption rates of technology. This is something we've looked at from particular technologies, whether it's BIM or other types of technologies. How are you finding it with the technology that you're offering?
I think what's happened now, there's external forces, as we just talked about, for example, of the lack of resources. And now they're having to realise that the people aren't there. I mean, the resources are not there, so they're trying to something that has to fill that gap. And technology is one of those ways they can fill that gap.
Do you think that's one of the primary motivations behind adoption across the construction?
100%, yeah.
Really? So, because I would have thought, well, obviously the labour shortage is a huge thing, but also the margins getting tighter and tighter.
Yep.
That it's just not allowing for maybe a human element to do things that don't require a human element, and this is where we're going.
The industry itself, if you think about it, construction is probably the largest industry in the world, but yet it's the least automated.
Oh, really? Is that
the least automated of all the industries in the world? That's just
because I suppose there's such a heavy emphasis on the manual aspect of it.
Absolutely, yeah.
But there shouldn't be when you think about it, because if you think about something like bricklaying, it's typically.
But it's so old, I suppose. It's not like medicine and so forth, where technology now is seen as a very positive thing. Whereas we still associate building with the old, the buckets and wheelbarrows.
And we mentioned IT companies, for example. We know for a fact that the likes of Google, Tesla, Elon Musk's company has the Boring company. They're setting up construction companies now. So they're competing against the traditional construction companies.
Sorry, I haven't heard that. Elon Musk is setting up a construction company.
Has a construction company. Already has completed projects.
In the States,
in the
obviously.
States, yes. And obviously the financial backing.
All on.
Now, are these modular or...
No, he has tunneling. So he's building tunnels.
Infrastructure,
construction jobs. So he's competing against the traditional construction companies. But he obviously has the financial backing. Obviously too, and Google are the same, because they can see the IT, they can see that there's a gap there within the digital side of it, that traditional companies are not embracing it as much or as quickly as they should be. So they have already got the IT side of it, and they can see that there's a gap there that they can fill and they can move in there.
Yeah.
So they're already starting to do that.
I think it's really interesting. I mean, this time last year when we started the show and we started talking about technology and covering particularly prop tech and construction technologies, one of the really poignant things that was pointed out by Tom Parlin in the CIF, the Construction Industry Federation, was that decades ago, in times of crisis, construction workers from Ireland had to emigrate. Now they were exporting. Yes. And this is such a fundamental shift that's going to reimagine construction. And it's given... Ireland has taken quite a leadership position, and I'm not sure how recognised in Ireland that is, that actually Ireland has shown leadership in terms of certainly off-site manufacturing and other areas.
I found it actually amazing. Just in the Wall Street Journal a couple of weeks ago, I read an article in relation to the population. The global population is going to be 9 billion by 2050. It's 7.7 billion at the moment. How is that infrastructure gap going to be filled? If it's not using technology. And that's why the likes of these large IT companies, Google, the Boring company, Tesla, as I say, Legal in General in the UK are starting to build houses. IKEA are starting to build modular houses. Okay. So these large global companies are starting to move into construction because they can see these statistics that are there. 9 billion people, 7.7 billion at the moment. Like, how is the infrastructure needs going to be met to meet?
Are they being privately financed?
That's the same size as 5 times Europe. So the construction of 5 Europes has to happen between now and 2050 to meet the needs and demand of the growing population.
So you definitely need to motivate your students, or there'll be nobody to do that.
For sure.
Yeah.
How is that going to happen?
Can we just get a little bit specific about the technology, because I've never trialed any of your technology. So talk us through. Say, who are your main customers?
So all of the large contractors basically would use some sort of either software or hardware. So traditionally we would laser levels for 2D, for example, for levels, and then bringing that the next level would be 3D. So a robotic total station, for example, and that's usually you put a 3D drawing. You can survey a greenfield site. Move that drawing, basically that survey, into a 3D software, and then create your design, your housing design, for example, and then put that back onto your instrument, and the engineers are able to set it out. Now we can take that a third level again, a next level again, which is putting that CAD drawing onto an excavator or a dozer. So instead of having an engineer spraying paint on the ground for the outline of where the buildings should be, for example, or the road layout, now we can put that into the machine itself, and we can automate that process. So we can put the CAD drawing onto the operator, into the machine itself.
Okay, are you...
So instead of any longer...
So it's all computer driven, obviously.
It's computer, exactly. So the CAD drawing is on the machine. So instead of that being completely dependent on just the operator and maybe being indicated by somebody externally outside the machine of where he needs to be, when he needs to be. We can actually put the control into the control of the operators now, and they can actually see exactly where they're at in relation to where the finished design should be. So they're cutting exactly to the finished levels and exactly the correct direction. So we're putting the 3D drawing onto the machine itself.
You've great YouTube videos. Because I looked through a few of those, and actually you have them explained very well, and I think you have a couple of videos that actually show just how quickly people who might have been in the industry for decades, who've never embraced technology previously, how quickly they could be trained up. Because I think you've one where you do a training session of about 20 minutes, and then people go off and use the technology.
And that's the thing about it, there is a bit of a fear factor there. But that fear factor, is literally within minutes, as you say, we can have them, show them something, and they can see the penny drop straight away, or they can see the efficiency straight away. It also improves on an operators, for example, how good the operators. It can make them a lot more efficient, and that's what the construction companies want. As you say, with the low margins that they have, they need to make these operators and these machines a lot more efficient.
So I can see these guys, I can see these operators getting very nervous. The
thing about it is,
with the figures.
As we just talked about earlier on, there's operator shortage too, huge operator shortage within the industry. And so what we can do is now we can put a system on there that can make an average operator a lot more efficient. And that's what we're able to do, and that's on the construction side and the, on the machine side. On the other side, we can, verification tools on site, for example. So you've got a design of a site and a vertical construction. We can actually scan that as it's going up, and near real time, we can actually scan the actual building itself to make sure it's actually to the design. And if it's not, we can update the design literally nearly in real time, if you know what I mean. So there's those tools there. It's technology tools that.
So you're not just talking about man-hour savings. You're talking about cost savings for project revisions.
Rework, for example, revisions, rework.
Yeah.
Up to 30-40% of savings possible. So instead of it being the offsite manufacturing to make sure the construction on site is happening properly, we can actually update the model fairly quickly, literally near real time, and to update the guys off site to make sure, right, okay, this opening, instead of this design and this measurement, it's now actually this on site. Change the design, and so it's not landing to site and then rework has to happen. So we can avoid that.
Yeah, and we know that that's the direction it needs to go, and anything that will improve margins for the construction industry. It traditionally was said that the construction sector were difficult. They were difficult buyers. They were difficult to sell to. Whereas I don't think that's true at all. Actually, I think that they're absolutely value driven. So if there's value to be added, something that's going to improve the margins, then they're very quick to embrace it. I haven't found them slow to embrace anything that's going to improve the margins. I think that's it's
that initial jump.
Yeah.
Once they jump on that and they realise and see the benefits straight away, and they can see the benefits straight away. And once they see that, the efficiencies, the saving, these systems and how it's a no-brainer for them, and it just leads to more and more and more.
Absolutely. And by the way, before we let you go, congratulations! I see that you have been shortlisted for digital innovation at the 2020 ICE Awards.
Yeah, so really excited about that actually. So it's a new tool, basically new to the industry. I just spoke about it a second. It's a near real-time verification tool. So it's not just a piece of hardware, but it's also software combined together, and it just verifies that the design itself is actually what's been built inside. If it's not, we can update that design fairly quickly, near real-time. And it's fairly unique within the industry, which is really exciting actually, and again, adds to efficiencies.
Very good. When are the awards?
It's coming up in a couple of weeks' time. I'm not exactly sure of the date, so it's in the convention centre in Dublin, so we're looking forward to that.
Best of luck. We'll keep our fingers crossed. We'll keep our fingers crossed for you. So Carl Friel of TopCon Ireland, thank you so much for joining us today. Coming up after the break, we will be speaking to Jim Earle, CEO of Property Button. Stay tuned.
Your community radio for South Dublin. This is Dublin South FM.
Are you part of a local community group or representative organisation active in the Dun Laoghaire Rathdown area? Why not join a network of over 400 such groups in the Dun Laoghaire Rathdown Public Participation Network? You can join the group, influence local policy, get regular updates about funding and other opportunities, connect with other groups like yours, publicise your group, and even get free training and support. Make sure your voice is heard through DLR Public Participation Network as a registered group in the county. Dun Laoghaire Rathdown Public Participation Network. For full information, find us online at dlrppn.ie. That's dlrppn.ie.
Could you and your dog spend 1 hour per week bringing special moments to people in care centres? Or would you like one of our volunteer visiting teams to come and visit your care centre? At Irish Therapy Dogs, we have a dedicated interest in the use of pet therapy for people in long-term or daily residential care. a professional organisation aimed at providing a pet therapy service on a national basis. If you with your dog would like to get involved, or if you would like one of our visiting teams to visit your care centre, then please call us on 01 544 6198 or visit irishtherapydogs.ie for more information.
Senior Line is a confidential telephone service for older people. Free phone 1800 80 45 91. We're open every day of the year from 10 a.m. till 10 p.m, including Christmas Day and New Year. So it's free phone 1800 80 45 91. We're there if you need someone to talk to and need someone to listen. We're older people too, so we will understand, and we're very good at listening. Did you get the Senior Line number? It's free phone 1800 80 45 91.
Everything's fine on 93.9 Dublin South FM.
And very welcome back to Property Matters here in Dublin South FM with Carol Tallon and myself, Bryan Fox. So as mentioned before the break there, we're now joined in studio by Jim Urall, CEO of Urall. Jim, thanks for we'll stay with your first name.
Yeah, well, let's go with Jim.
Get the company name right anyway. So you're here from Property Bud.
That's right. Jim, let's just begin by asking you. You've been here in the studio before. Just talk through your range of services before we get into the actual interview itself.
Sure. Yeah, we started out solving utility problems, mainly for letting agents, and we've developed that into sales estate agents and developers. So. I guess, a bit of context, about 1 in 10 utility switches go wrong. And it can seem like such a simple thing that Carl moves out of a house, Bryan moves into a house, and it just seems like it should go like clockwork. Yeah. But it doesn't. About 1 in 10 of them go wrong, and there's all these problems like disconnects and reconnects and billing issues and debt flagging. Not that there would be debt flagging between Bryan and Carl now, but these things can happen in the industry. And if you're doing 10 of these a month, then the one that goes wrong is novel for you, it's new, and it's hard to solve, and it can block the sale of a property, or it can block a new tenant moving into a property. That's a week's rent gone wallop.
But it's also time, because I know in speaking with independent estate agents, one of the time delays, we asked them about kind of where they're wasting time, and one of them is on hold to utilities. That can be up to 20 minutes per call, and it can require a number of calls.
That's it, Carl.
Time.
And we do thousands and thousands of these a month. So the problem that's novel for your sales agency or your builder's firm or your letting agency is bread and butter for us. We work with all the utilities, and that's where we started out. We built ourselves a name in that area. We've most of the letting agents in the country, an increasing number of the sales estate agents in the country, because it's just a nice post-sale service for them. They don't have the same requirements, but it delivers a lovely, compliant. You move into a house, you have 101 things to do, and it's just nice to be able to get an SMS, click on a link and see, there's all the services available at my house, and a really simple way to choose the ones you want. Just taking all the heat out of it for you. And from a sales or a letting agent's perspective, just that assurance that if something goes wrong, and it does 1 in 10 times, that there's this crowd who can manage that for you in a smooth way. And that's the property button business.
So that would be 7 days a week then, I take it, is it?
Yeah. Unfortunately, it can be. We run everything on Salesforce, and I can be really killed at home because I constantly look at my phone and go, right, what's in, what isn't, and just tracking everything through the business across the dashboards that we use to see, problems and switches that have come in and resolution timeframes, and just making sure that we're hitting the service agreements to our customers that we want to achieve, and that's been a significant differentiator for us, that service. Just going, look, you have a problem, it's new for you, it's bread and butter for us, we'll knock that out and let you know when it's done.
And that's something, last year you were in studio with us, and it was in the context when we were talking about tech adoption rates across estate agents, and you probably heard Pat Davitt from IPAV in with us earlier today, and just last week there was a call out for greater digitisation of the process of buying and selling and transferring properties in Ireland. So this is something that estate agents are getting from all sides now, and that wasn't the case a few years ago. And I think last year one of the interesting things was that we saw, in terms of tech adoption, that actually your utility switching service was one of the first pieces of technology that some estate agents around the country were using. So you were their introduction to technology. So because you work now with so many of the estate and letting agents around the country, how have you geared up your services in terms of going beyond utilities switching?
Perfect. Yeah. So I exactly. You know, we engage with these sales agents, these letting agents in particular, and we identified a new problem they were having, particularly related to rental properties, which is you advertise a property for rental in any of our metropolitan our towns, and there's such a low availability that you will have hundreds of people applying, and they will send you all sorts of personal information about themselves and their parents.
The love letters.
Poor devils. It's just so hard to get a property, and they're from an estate agent perspective, they're going, I'm getting a flood of emails, and I don't know who's good and who's bad. I don't know, I need a fair way to compare these, because I can't look at 400 emails. In one case, for a property in Bray, we saw 2,800 applications.
2,800 in Bray?
In Bray.
Was this a house or apartment?
3-bed semi, standard 3-bed semi.
Wow.
Availability of property in North Wicklow in particular has been family property has been like hen's teeth, really like hen's teeth. So you see that, and as a estate agent or a letting agent, you're sitting there and you're going, how do I manage that? With GDPR legislation, with the anti-discrimination legislation, how do I do that in a fair and transparent way? And it's been almost impossible. So we developed and rolled out and beta tested last year a service we call Moving, and it's gone really well. And we'll announce quite shortly a partnership with a major, much bigger than us company here in Ireland to roll out that service, and that's going to roll out nationwide. We can't right now. I wish I could. I'm being a bit of a tease, I know, but you'll be the first one I'll call.
Could you give us an idea of how it works?
Yeah.
Could you give us an idea of how Moving works?
Yeah,
it does sound.
So we think it's cool, but I would think it's cool. If my daughter was here, she'd flick her eyes to heaven. But you apply for a viewing for a property, and as a tenant, your experience is you log on to a portal, you apply for a viewing, and you may get an acknowledgement that your email has been received, but that's it. And you may do that over a period of 3 or 6 months, probably. That's a regular experience, to 30 or 40 properties, and not really know what's going on. Are you in the mix or are you not? How should you improve your application so you get into the mix? There's no feedback, and it's just a horrible experience. You've got a couple of co-tenants. Things are changing for everyone. It's just really frustrating. You can just see how that's just not nice. From an estate agent side, they're getting hundreds, if not thousands, of applications going, I need to manage these in a compliant way. How do I do it? Really difficult for them. Really difficult for them to do that in a compliant way, but really difficult for them to manage their brand, because you want to respond to everyone and say, thank you for your application, Carl, or unfortunately at this stage, or great news.
I presume most of these applicants over time may become potential buyers and then subsequent sellers. So
absolutely.
Yeah,
100%.
Relationship property has always been about people, and technology just facilitates that. It doesn't replace it. So,
100%.
I can understand from even a reputation management point of view that it's really important for overburdened estate agents to get this right.
And you see a recognition of that, Carl, actually, in the market now, where there was very clear distinction between rentals and sales as professions, and how they were managed in the past. You absolutely see by estate agents and by prop tech companies like ourselves that people start their property journey as a renter, and they're going. Whereas before, everyone perceived that you get on the property ladder at X stage and you buy a house.
Sure.
That's long delayed now because of affordability. So people are recognising you need to give people a really good service in their 20s when they start, and potentially they'll stay with you when they buy, or they'll remember you when they buy and buy again. So absolutely, and I think there's a recognition of that now, Carl.
And in terms of, because it's not just estate agents you're working with and tenants, because I can see that tenant portal moving. That's something that benefits both the tenants and the estate agents. But you're working across the full spectrum, so you're actually working to speed up the delivery of these homes as well.
Yes,
how are you doing that?
So our utility, the ability that we built in utility, and that understanding and the relationships we had, we could see for building a house, there was just so many parties involved. the big builders now are trying to pour a foundation, build a house and sell it within 16 weeks. And to do that, you just need a huge amount of coordination. And just on the utility side, you have to coordinate at the early planning stage to get your cabling in around your estate as you're building the roads, getting the ducting in. So our team engage with builders at that very early stage, at planning application stage, and advising them what's available, the trends in the market, what can be installed, and actually helping them with the negotiation of those contracts with the cable companies. So that's number one.
I need to put it to you then. Do you deal with Irish Water?
Unfortunately, we don't.
Because they say, they're quoted so often as being the cause of delays for new homes that are sitting, waiting, ready to go, cannot get connection to Irish Water, and they're being cited in construction and new homes delivery delays consistently now, publicly and privately.
No, we hear it a lot. When you get into these problems, like we got into the electricity and gas problem, and we consistently heard that, it was X company to blame or Y company to blame. And when you get into it, you realise that there's a builder trying to build a house. There's a contractor trying to complete the wiring and hand over the wiring in that property at a certain time. There's a retail network provider that needs to get the registration so that they can actually create a bill for that property. And there's the network provider that wants to put in a meter. And you look at this problem and you go, it's actually a bit of a wicked problem, because everybody has their own goal and objective, which they're individually achieving, but it's not coordinated between those four parties. And that's where we came in. We could see, okay, well, we can make sure that the data is available at each point in time. So if the wiring cert is completed, making sure that that is registered with ESB Networks. So ESB Networks then have everything they need to complete the next step in that. So that bringing just that understanding of what each of the parties need as their crucial inputs, and putting that under their nose and accessible at the right times. So there will be other delays, because when data meets a construction site, the real world gets in the way of me sitting in my office in Bray saying, oh, this is how it'll beautifully work. But there are people who understand that a lot better than me. But our job is to make sure that the data problems that currently exist, we remove those and we create better coordination between the four parties.
So I suppose ultimately your service pays off for the builder in terms of snags and problems at the other end of the sale.
That's it, Brian. To be able to hit to be able to hit a 16-week or a 24-week, whatever it is, pour foundation to sales cycle, you need the various
proper
parties lined up,
ducks in a row. In other words,
yeah, like a 1 week delay on putting in a meter. That's you cannot complete your snagging. You cannot complete your fix two unless the meters are in live. You can't do the gas until the electricity is done. You can't do the electricity until the cert is completed. You can't complete the cert unless etc. And we just need to make sure that those things are coordinated for our developer.
And they can see the benefit in that of your service.
Thankfully now.
It's taken time, obviously.
Yeah, it has. It's like any new thing, and you're talking to people who know their job, and they look at you and they go, "Yeah, right." But we've been at this a good few years now. We've proven ourselves out to the utilities that we're a trusted partner, that we're not, we're not flying by the seat of our pants. We've proven ourselves out to the builders and the developers, so that our name is passed in between those guys that will do what we say we do, and that's working well for us.
Yeah, and look, as you point out, Property Button is one of the longest established property technology companies in Ireland, and you're certainly probably one of the most widespread across various sectors of the industry. I'm going to put you on the spot. What's new? What are you working on? What are you innovating for 2020?
Yeah, so our moving service is the crucial thing for us. So we've been...
Sounds exciting.
It really is.
Where are adoption rates right now?
So we put it into 11 agents for beta testing, and to be frank, our initial objective for that was let's get more utility switches out of it, because that's where we make money. But the agents and the tenants just loved it.
Great.
And then thankfully, the Data Protection Commissioner issued a set of guidelines in July stating this is how you need to behave. And if you map them to moving, they're almost directly correlated. So we were good. Thank you very much, Data Protection Commissioner.
Without consulting you.
yeah.
But that's a really important one because certainly agents are terrified. Are terrified about not complying, and it's very difficult to comply when the guidelines aren't clear.
And
that was really so that was something that was badly needed.
Badly needed and done, you know.
Right. So now, what's the next stage? So you've tested in 11
We've tested
agents.
it. We've signed a partnership here in Ireland. We're in rollout. That will secure the Irish market first. That deal. That will roll out in June. So that's Ireland. And then we've worked with Enterprise Ireland to enter the Netherlands.
That's my next question. Right, expansion.
So the Netherlands looks like the right next market for us. Enterprise Ireland have been fantastic for us. They entered the Eurozone programme. Really brought us through the whole process of identifying markets, understanding them, how to address them, making sure that we're not going for Germany. Let's go for Germany, from little old Ireland, bringing us to meet the Germans and the French, and then understanding, okay, they will work with us, but we need, a core European market proof case. And then looking at those markets, what's addressable, and focusing then in on the Netherlands that has the right attributes for us, So.
That's a really interesting one. Can I get specific here and ask you what are those attributes, as in what makes the Netherlands a good fit?
Sure. So
that's not one I would have jump to.
Strong urban centres, low availability of rental property, high demand for rental property, GDPR compliance, which of course is across the EU.
Do home ownership rates and trends figure into this?
They do, but a strong rental market, I guess, being the colliery almost of the home ownership, but definitely those two things are related. But it's strong rental market, GDPR compliance, strong property portals operating in the market, strong demand. Crucially, what we saw in the Netherlands, and it's building here, but it's much stronger in the Netherlands, is a real focus by individuals in society to protect their personal data. So a real reticence on behalf of people to go, here's all my information to try and get a property. They're very shy about giving out their data, and moving allows someone to control their personal profile, to say, I'll give this agent access to this bit because we're only at a long list stage. We're at shortlisted, I'll give more. We're at contract stage, I can reveal a lot. And to be sure that the moving application, if someone else has been chosen for a property or you haven't been shortlisted, that your information is removed from their view.
But they must have a low delivery then in relation to houses as well, if the rental market is under pressure.
I wouldn't be able to quote you, Bryan, on their delivery of property, but certainly in terms of rental property availability, the demand is far outstripping supply. But that'd be common in a lot of European markets, in urban areas in European markets. Netherlands, they adopt and they give you the fast no. No, we do not want it. And that's what I want it, really, to be honest. I want to know. I don't want to waste a lot of time trying to sell to someone in the Netherlands who doesn't really want it.
Sure, yeah.
That's an interesting. So what's the timescale for that?
So we're completing our market entry strategy at the moment. We'll present that to Enterprise Ireland on Thursday, actually.
Best of luck.
So I'm looking forward to that. So next stages then we'll be in market in June time frame. We'll beta test probably towards the end of this year with a dozen agents, same way as we did in Ireland. Make sure we've got product market fit, being able to show that to the companies that we'd like to sell to, the much larger companies, and securing a deal.
Exciting times ahead. Very good. Okay, thank you so much for joining us today. That was Jim Ural, CEO of Property Button. Thank you so much for joining us. We'd like to thank all of our guests who joined us on the show this week. That's it from us today. Thank you for listening in to Property Matters, the show where property matters. Get in touch with the show by emailing hello@ipropertyradio.com or on Twitter @ipropertyradio. Also, thank you to Peter Rice on sound and to our show producer, Katie Tallon. We're back at the same time next week. From Bryan Fox and myself, Carol Tallon, and all the team here, have a great week.